major event, oftentimes you'll see articles that are kind of completely lying. A lot of the time, actually, especially headlines where it'll be like, Islamic State uses PlayStation 4 to plot terror attack. And then that turns out to not be true at all, as is the case here. This is Digital Drive here on Hot News Talk Radio, AM 1240. We're brought to you by Rick Davis Gold and Diamonds. There's actually a total store sale going on now, and you need to do this now before Christmas. 50, 16, 70% off on designer jewelry and gifts. Make for a great gift. You can also get cash when you sell your gold, silver, bracelets, rings, diamonds, jewelry. Rick Davis will pay you personally with cash. And you can get some today. Just go to Rick Davis Gold and Diamonds over there in Brainerd and get yourself some cash for your jewelry. Now, the story that came out maybe 2 days ago was that the Islamic State used the PlayStation 4 to plot this terror attack that happened in Paris. Now, that's a really nice headline. It makes for really great news because news is almost entertainment, especially TV news. Like it pretty much is entertainment. People oftentimes will watch the news just because it's dramatic, and the news is presented that way on TV a lot of the time. I don't like to take that approach because the news should speak for itself. The facts should speak for itself. Essentially, when you're doing the news, you can use really dramatic verbiage, right? You can be really dramatic in how you word things, but don't make up stuff to make it sound more dramatic, and don't use unsubstantiated studies to make it more dramatic as well, because I hate it when people do that. I hate it when different news articles or news organizations do that, because you'll oftentimes see a detail which is completely unrelated to everything, used as some sort of odd little add-on to the end of an article. It drives me nuts. Like, sometimes it makes sense for context, so you can sort of understand what's going on here. I'll give you an example of what I did one time. There was a news story about airbags which were prematurely going off with a particular explosive, potassium nitrate, that was exploding and prematurely and potentially, allegedly anyway, causing injuries. So that's the story. So to help ground it, potassium nitrate, maybe you don't know what potassium nitrate is. So to give context for what potassium nitrate is, I said, potassium nitrate was also the same compound that was used as it was used as a component for the bombs which went off at Oklahoma City bombing. I think that's a relevant point, just to point out that this is the same stuff. Used in smaller amounts. Now, I did note that too in the news article, is that in much larger scale that was used in the Oklahoma City bombing. So you get the idea of the explosive power of potassium nitrate. It's just for context. It's not linking these airbags to the Oklahoma City bombing. It's just using context to show, this is what the stuff does. This is a basic idea of what it might be, because not everybody knows what potassium nitrate is, and that's fine. I only know what it is because I like reading about bomb making for some reason. I'm weird that way. So I know about it, but not everybody does, and I recognize that. So it's okay. Don't worry if you don't know things, right? Like, there's no shame in ignorance. There's only shame in not wanting to know. That's been my mantra for a long time. Whenever I feel that I'm being accosted by some evil spirit, I will constantly repeat that while crossing myself and hope that the evil spirits go away. I'm joking, but you get the idea, just adding context. Well, for some reason, some news articles and news agencies jumped on this weird bandwagon of the PlayStation 4 being used as a communications device for the Islamic State. Now, I almost fell for it. I presented that story yesterday, just saying, it seems kind of surprising, but I guess anything can really be used as communications. You wouldn't expect it to be the PS4, though. I should have seen through it, but I kind of didn't. I did to some degree, but not all the way, not as far as I should have. And the problem with this news story is it's kind of perfect for people who like these kinds of stories. Because, number one, it's video games, and people don't like those. Older people tend to not like them. So video games are immediately like, well, we need to get rid of them anyway, so obviously I'm against this. Number two, it's the Islamic State, so obviously that's another negative for the older generation. So you have video games and you've got the Islamic State, and then it's using communications potentially encrypted for planning bombings or whatever. So it's sort of like a triple whammy, basically, of all the things that a certain generation doesn't really like that much, generally speaking, in one headline. That's perfect. It's a great headline. That's like noisy teenagers at 4 a.m. who don't have jobs and collect welfare might be participating with the Islamic State. So it's like all these things which older people don't like sort of compiled into one. Now, nobody likes the Islamic State except for the Islamic State. But, I mean, we get that. But you add on these different elements, and somehow it makes it that much more hateable. It makes it more annoying because as bad as IS is, it's kind of disconnected. Like, we feel a disconnect between us and the Islamic State. So bringing it home with that Gamer article makes a lot of sense. It's just incorrect. At least that's what Ars Technica says. So Ars Technica has a really good article here saying there's no evidence that ISIS used the PS4 to plan the Paris attacks. Something else that has to be kept in mind about ISIS or ISIL or the Islamic State or Daesh is that it has like 40 different names, and I'm pretty sure they all mean the same thing. ISIL is the Islamic State in, I want to say, Iraq and the Levant. And then ISIS is the Islamic State in Iraq and Syria. The Islamic State is just the Islamic State without any territory claim. And Daesh is a derogatory term for the Islamic State. And in Arabic, it means like unclean or something like that. I don't recall. So you get the idea, or fraudulent. I think it actually means fraudulent. I'm not particularly certain on that. My Arabic is nil, just as my French is almost as bad, and my Russian is absolutely horrid. English is the only language I speak very well, and I don't really speak English very well, so I've got a lot of strikes against me, I guess. Several UK media outlets, including the Daily Mail, the Mirror, and the Telegraph, have claimed that Sony's PlayStation 4 was being used, or is being used, by ISIS to plan its attacks, with the Express even saying that a PS4 was used to plot the recent horrifying attacks in Paris. Now, that is quite a claim, with not a whole lot of evidence behind it. However, as uncovered by Eurogamer, the sourcing and reporting for these stories is extremely suspect. Most are based on comments from Belgium's Deputy Prime Minister Jan Jambon, I believe, which came from a debate on ISIS's use of online recruitment. The debate was held 3 days before Friday's terrorist attacks in Paris. PlayStation 4 is even more difficult to keep track of than WhatsApp, he said. It's very, very difficult for our services, not only Belgian services, but international services, to decrypt the communication that is done via PlayStation 4. Jambon is most likely referring to the PS4's party chat feature, which allows players to exchange voice and text communications one-to-one or in a group, and it is encrypted. But there's no evidence that that feature is actually being used by terrorists, let alone that it played an integral part in the Paris attacks. See, we tend to freak out about encryption because encryption sounds scary and it keeps law enforcement from reading our messages, which in the end I say is a good thing, but a lot of people don't think that way, because a lot of people think that the law enforcement needs to be able to watch out for them terrorists and needs to be able to read all of our communications, thus trotting upon the Constitution in as many ways as possible with nice leather boots. That's kind of a problem, obviously. If you actually care about Constitution, then you would care that the law enforcement's reading our messages, whether they be encrypted or not. The problem, though, with this whole argument is that encryption is the future, and getting around it is not really going to work. Encryption has to exist, otherwise our financial data is totally insecure and totally unsafe. I was just reading an article the other day about how a lot of people will care much more about their financial information than they will about, say, their nude photos, which happen to be on their phones. Apparently, a lot of people do that. I don't know why. Why would you store that on your phone and not on a secure flash drive hidden in the ceiling tiles of your office? I don't know, but not that I do that, but you get the idea. It's just silly at that point. It's just silly that we're like, oh man, encryption is going to be the death of us all, but I certainly need to make secure financial transactions. Like, you understand, encryption is how you make secure financial transactions. You can't have them without encryption. You need encryption to exist online in any sort of seemingly secure way. You kind of need encryption a lot. So it's ridiculous to say, well, we don't need encryption. And I've actually seen people who say that we should give law enforcement backdoor codes or keys or whatever in order to make sure that the FBI can look into all of our records and make sure that we're not terrorists or what have you. Now, granted, the argument actually is that the FBI would only do this under warrant. And I can understand that. If it's under warrant, that does make sense, because if you have a warrant, it makes sense. However, I would say if you have something that is actually criminal on your phone and you know it, then giving away your PIN code would be a violation of the Fifth Amendment. You would be then testifying against yourself, essentially. You'd be potentially giving up evidence against yourself. You should never do that. Even if you're not a criminal, there could be something on there that they find that suddenly is illegal and you don't even know about it because there's so many different illegal things. So never give up your PIN code to law enforcement or anyone who asks for it ever, unless you absolutely trust them. And you should not absolutely trust law enforcement. So don't give up your PIN code. It's simple as that if you have one. A lot of people don't, and I don't know why. Here's my tip from me to you, by the way, about PIN codes. Don't use a fingerprint, because your fingerprint counts as physical evidence and can actually be forcibly removed from you. They can get your fingerprint because it's a physical item of evidence. Your PIN code, however, exists only intellectually as matter of record, so they can't actually grab that from you. Now, that's why the whole backdoor thing is being pushed so hard by the FBI, James Comey being the head of that. As director of the FBI, James Comey's really been pushing for backdoors into encryption. And you can understand the argument because it seems to be a quite convincing one, where it's all about, we need to stop them terrorists. That's what it really comes down to, is stopping those terrorists. The problem, though, is definitions of terrorists is actually quite loose when looking at law enforcement definitions, because anyone could technically be a terrorist under definitions which law enforcement uses. Lots of people are terrorists. That's kind of the thing. Plus, suspicion is not really enough. You need a warrant that's substantiated by oath or affirmation, as that's what's in the Fourth Amendment. That's how it works in the legal justice system in the states. So you can't just grab someone's phone and demand their PIN code. You have to have a warrant, which is supported by oath or affirmation. Even if this person happens to be, say, a refugee from Syria, they still have constitutional rights despite not being citizens. That's something a lot of people don't actually get, is that constitutional rights, if they were governed by just your citizenship, may as well not even exist, because if they're as fickle as that, then they're not obviously given by God, then they're granted by the state, which is not the case. So obviously you have rights even if you are not a U.S. citizen. Surprisingly enough, to some people, that actually is true. You have rights despite not being American or British or French or Italian or what have you. You still have rights, believe it or not. It's kind of a crazy concept, but they don't come from the state and they don't come from sheets of paper. And in fact, the Constitution and the Declaration both say that they're held to be self-apparent. It's just that these papers, the documents, are here so that the government recognizes these rights, which are already self-apparent. That's the thing. But we don't need to get into that any deeper. We already understand that. So the idea then that government somehow needs to get into our phones to keep us safer doesn't seem to have a whole lot of qualification, because I'm not really seeing evidence of that keeping us any safer. We have all these different safeguards and we have all these different institutions, and yet things still happen. Bad things still happen despite all these different safeguards. Maybe we need to accept that bad things sometimes happen. Sometimes really tragic, awful things happen. And maybe there's not anything that we can do about it sometimes. Maybe all the different safeguards and securities in the world can't actually protect us against the evils out there, because maybe the evils out there are sometimes a little bit stronger than the different safeguards we have. Because if we're talking about Islamic State, we're talking about real lawlessness, really. We're talking about society, not really a society, but we're talking about an organization which doesn't really care for traditional warfare or traditional laws or mindsets, and nothing's traditional, really, about the Islamic State. There's so many different things about it that make it so non-traditional that we're not used to it. We've never fought anything like it before. The world is a different place when it comes to warfare. It doesn't operate in any sort of traditional military sense. And there's not any legal way to protect against that in the traditional warfare being waged way of thinking. So it's hard to wage war against something that doesn't have any defined personnel other than just some people who say, I'm going to do this or that for Syria or what have you. So it all makes it very difficult for law enforcement. And it's understandable the plight of law enforcement, but we also have to understand that we can't protect everyone against everything. And really, government's not that great at protecting us against things anyway, so I'm kind of okay with that, honestly. But no, the whole PlayStation 4 argument was ridiculous. It didn't make any sense at all. I mean, I can understand if the Islamic State communicates over the PlayStation 4, like that makes sense, but it's just another encrypted method of communications. It's just another way to do voice over IP. It's not anything new. It's not particularly unique. It's just another way of doing it. If it wasn't that, it'd be Skype. If it wasn't that, it'd be WhatsApp, or it'd be iChat or whatever. Talks even. I mean, there's all sorts of different chat clients that you've probably never heard of that are much better encrypted than the PlayStation 4, that actually have open source encryption that are much, much better because they can be audited by users. So it just doesn't make any sense to be all worried about encryption. It's short-sighted, it's reactionary, and it's kind of ridiculous, honestly. Well, the mainstream UK media has linked Jambon's comments with the Paris attacks by way of an International Business Times article, which claimed that a PlayStation 4 was discovered in raids in Belgium following the attacks. But even if that is confirmed, that doesn't really mean anything. I mean, really, that doesn't mean anything at all, that a terrorist happens to own a PlayStation 4. Now, I guarantee you the cops are going to raid that PS4 and find all the different information that's on it, his leaderboard scores or whatever. But having a PlayStation 4 doesn't really mean anything. If we're talking about young people, which ISIS seems to be made up of course they're going to have a PS4. I mean, of course one of them is going to have one, because as far as I know, there's not anything in Islam that says you can't play video games. So, I mean, yeah, they can own PS4s. It's not surprising, actually. These are normal, well, not normal, but these are humans who also enjoy leisure and also enjoy different entertainment. It's like, just because they're members of ISIS, suddenly they can't ever like film or video games. I mean, they are human. They're just kind of messed up. They're combatants, yeah, but for some reason we like to attribute inhuman qualities to our enemies, and I understand, but I think a lot of the time it actually makes it harder for us to understand our enemies when we attribute inhuman qualities to them. Sometimes they're worthwhile, like sometimes they actually are sort of inhuman, but we're all kind of human and we all enjoy much of the same things. So an ISIS member enjoying a PlayStation 4 is not any more surprising than a Republican enjoying a PlayStation 4 or anyone else. It's not surprising. So it's like, man, Hitler really liked to read books. So obviously, books are what caused Hitler to go bad. I mean, it's like Hitler really enjoyed film. Kim Jong-un really enjoys film. So that means that film obviously radicalized him. I mean, it doesn't make any sense at all. So, Osama bin Laden liked to read magazines. So obviously, Vogue is to blame. It seems rather silly at that point. Maybe he's using Vogue to communicate with his radical cells somewhere. It's just silly. But the IB Times article itself was based on actually another article on Forbes, long chains of articles here, which now features a large correction at the top saying it has not been confirmed as originally written that a console was found as a resource or as a result of specific Belgian terror raids. Minister Jambon was speaking about tactics he knows ISIS to be using generally. We have heard before that the Islamic State might be using Call of Duty to communicate with people for recruitment. I've not seen any confirmation of that. I don't know if that's actually true. So it's just a story, as far as I know right now. It's just legend. It's pathos at this point. We don't know if it's actually true. ISIS might be using encrypted apps, though, for communications, according to a former intel official who blames Snowden, Edward Snowden. And actually, the New York Times pulled the article, which it published on Monday, stating that French officials, speaking off the record, said that the Paris attackers used encrypted communications to coordinate their attacks with ISIS. Ars Technica, which I'm pulling from, will update the story further as more information comes out. But there's an investigation into last Friday's coordinated terrorist attack and quickly turned up evidence, potentially, anyway, allegedly, that members of the Islamic State communicated with the attackers from Syria using encrypted communications. That's according to French officials, according to this article. Former CIA Deputy Director Michael Morrell said in an interview on CBS's Face the Nation on Sunday, "I think what we're going to learn is that these guys are communicating via these encrypted apps. This commercial encryption, which is very difficult or nearly impossible for governments to break, and the producers of which don't produce the keys necessary for law enforcement to read the encrypted messages." The problem with that, though, is, again, giving up the keys to that would essentially be giving away all security, because the purpose of these encrypted apps is that you have secure communications. And then if it turns out that you're giving away the keys to law enforcement, you may as well get rid of the whole mantra of, well, we have secure communications, because you don't anymore. Now, understand there's no such thing as complete security. But also what has to be understood is that we do actually have a right to be communicating without being snooped in on. That right to privacy is a real thing. So despite what you might think, even if you are a suspected terrorist, you still can communicate in an encrypted manner. Because suspected doesn't mean proven, by the way. It's something that needs to be pointed out. Suspicion does not mean proven, not proven in the court of law, so it's alleged at that point. But still, anybody has a right to privacy. So if you're communicating via encryption, really, there's nothing wrong with that. You can do that. I mean, I use encrypted communications all the time. You do too. If you're using Facebook to chat or text or anything, you're using encrypted communications. Using encrypted communications does not mean anything. It's not a prerequisite for any crime. It doesn't prove anything. It's just encrypted communications. And again, giving away the code to that, the key to that, would be giving away the keys to the kingdom, essentially. It makes no sense at all. It's just silly. Because again, you can't trust governments entirely. And if it starts with the US, it's going to be every other government after that one. So I understand and applaud these different organizations and companies for not giving away the encryption keys, because that could lead to much worse things in the future. This is Digital Drive here on Hot News Talk Radio, AM 1240, and hotnewstalkradio.com.
This is a modern world. This is the modern world. What kind of fool do you think I am? You think I know nothing about my...
You give us 12 minutes and 40 seconds, we'll give you Chattanooga and the world.
News Talk 1240.
Sky Aerial Services uses advanced drone technology to give you a better perspective and depth of your property and project. We offer aerial photography and video for your business, farm, home, or advertising campaigns, as well as editing services to complete the experience. Call us at 423-521-0284 and see how we can help you tell your story about your business, property, or project. We work with real estate professionals, both commercial and residential, developers, engineer inspectors, surveyors, ad agencies, auto and boat dealers, mapping services, insurance inspectors, corporate marketing, charity events, weddings, and photographers. Our consultation is free. Call 423-521-0284. That's 423-521-0284, or visit our website, skyaerialservices.com. Sky Aerial Services. The sky is our limit.
Here you are, working to keep your customers happy and to manage your cash flow. IRS problems are the last thing you need, but here they are, flapping about you like vultures. Get help from Eric Pelton and his team of accountants at E.J. Pelton Company. Audits, letters, proposed return changes, 1099s, penalty threats. Pelton Tax Resolution Services brings peace of mind and helps you keep more of what you've earned. EJPelton.com. Offices on Brainerd Road and in Soddy Daisy, just north of the Bilo. That's E.J. Pelton. Call 622-3156. Think ahead, 622-3156.
We've got a table here at Delia's in Soddy Daisy, ready to delight in a plate of authentic Mexican food. Delia's spreads a rich selection: loaded nachos, crazy chicken, homemade tamales, maybe the enchiladas with beef, chicken, pork, quesadillas. Every dish beautifully pictured on the menu to help us decide. Join us for lunch or dinner. We're at Delia's in Soddy Daisy on Dayton Pike near the Thrasher Light. Here's dinner. Delia's uses the freshest ingredients, cooked to perfection. Nachos, homemade. Delia's open every day except the Lord's Day. For lunch and dinner, treat yourself to Delia's genuine Mexican food. In Soddy, call 521-7145. That's 521-7145.
Hi, I'm Rebecca Costa, host of the Costa Report, every Sunday at 9 a.m. My guest this week is former Congressman from Ohio, Dennis Kucinich, who says a Department of Defense is not enough. The United States needs a Department of Peace, which is committed to avoiding wars. Is Kucinich on to something? Find out this Sunday at 9 a.m. on the Costa Report, right here on AM 1240, Hot News Talk Radio.
This is America Now with Meghan McCain.
President Obama makes Jimmy Carter look like Napoleon Bonaparte. We have a president that leads from behind, and when America doesn't lead, bad things happen.
Meghan McCain, weekdays at 7 p.m.
You give us 12 minutes and 40 seconds, we'll give you Chattanooga and the world.
News Talk 1240.
Hi, I'm David Tulis, inviting you to make the move with me 9 to 11 a.m. weekdays here at AM 1240 Hot News Talk Radio. The David Tulis Show, featuring Nooganomics.com for Chattanooga and beyond. 9 to 11 a.m. weekdays.
Fox News Radio, I'm Lillian Wu. As France reels from Friday's terror attacks, its president urging people to
refuse the fear, the division and hatred, and we have to choose life, culture, and sharing.
Through a translator speaking at a UN conference, this as the offensive on militants continues.
For the second night in a row, French jets pounded the ISIS stronghold in Raqqa. The Syrian city is considered ISIS's capital, and French officials say the airstrikes targeted command and control centers and militant training camps. It's impossible to know, however, if the airstrikes have been successful.
Fox's Connor Powell. Kentucky's outgoing Democratic governor says the state will recognize the marriage licenses that County Clerk Kim Davis altered because of her religious beliefs. And actor Charlie Sheen issuing a statement about being HIV positive, saying he found out roughly 4 years ago. Fox News, we report, you decide.
1240.
You give us 12 minutes and 40 seconds, we'll give you Chattanooga and the world.
News Talk 1240.
We're now seeing a lot of, what's the word? I guess debate about the future of computing. But we're also seeing a lot of debate as well, and I should get into this, about the future of travel. Let me be clear about this. I've never actually traveled very far outside of the U.S. I've traveled to Canada once. No, twice, actually. Twice. I traveled to Canada twice. Once to the Niagara Falls, which I have heard from Canadians does not actually count as going to Canada, so we'll not count that one. But I've also been to New Brunswick, so we'll count that one. And it's hard to drive all the way up to a foreign country, especially Canada, because it takes like 20 hours if you're going up through Maine. You can get to Toronto in like 12, but still that's 12 hours of driving straight. That's assuming you drive for 12 hours straight, which I don't know of any car that can do that. Maybe the Elio can, but maybe a Civic could. I don't know. But I mean, traveling is annoying, especially if you're going by ground. Now by air, things are much faster. Now I've never actually flown commercial anyway. I've never actually flown commercial because I've never really had any reason to. I mean, why would I want to leave here? Chattanooga is a great city. There's no reason to leave. So I've never actually flown commercial. I've driven lots, but never flown. The farthest west I've been is Louisiana, and the farthest north I've been in the U.S. is Maine, and in Canada would be Moncton in New Brunswick. So I've gone pretty much all the width of all the height of the East Coast, and that's about it for me. I've never flown anywhere. I've never been to Texas, never been out to the West Coast. I really want to go to California at some point, in Oregon and Washington, especially Seattle, but I haven't. I've always wanted to go to Toronto too. I really want to go to Toronto, but I haven't been able to do that either. Oh well, maybe someday. I also can't really get off work for that long to go to these places because I'm kind of necessary here. Funny as you might seem, actually, I'm kind of necessary here for a lot of different things. People freak out when I leave. Like sometimes on Monday when I leave early, people freak out. They're like, I need you to do this and this and this. It's like, okay, man, but I'm like not in the office. Wait for tomorrow. But no, so the future of travel might be supersonic, and that's what I'm trying to get at. By the way, today's show is brought to you by Rick Davis Gold and Diamonds. They have a total store sale going on right now, and you need it now, not after Christmas. There's a 50, 60, and 70% off designer jewelry and gift sale. Also, you can get cash when you sell gold, silver, bracelets, rings, diamonds, and jewelry, and Rick Davis will pay you cash personally. That's cash, cash, cash. Get some today over at Rick Davis Gold and Diamonds. Now, the debate about travel, the future of travel, has been a cool one, actually. Not really a lot of hot debate. Think back, though, to the 60s, where for some reason everyone thought that in the year 2000, we'd all be driving flying cars and stuff. And that's really not been the case and probably won't be the case because, I mean, everyone suddenly has to get a pilot's license, and flying around in our flying cars would mean air collisions potentially, and would mean cars crashing into houses because the engines fail and all sorts of terrible things that happen if we had flying cars. So we don't have flying cars because of that very reason. We have the technical capability right now to have flying cars. I mean, we could do it right now. It's just that it's not going to happen because of the whole question of, say, oops, I crashed into your house. I'm sorry. Does my car insurance cover that, or does what insurance covers that, really? So, yeah, that's why we don't have flying cars. Commercial flight, though, has really been the same for the last, 50 years. Really, I mean, it's not changed a whole lot, which seems kind of strange because we're in the 21st century. Now, I'm not talking about TSA because that's changed a lot. Security has changed a lot. Now there's not a hijacking every other day because of Cubans wanting to fly to Cuba and get expatriated and all sorts of other things. That doesn't really happen so much anymore. It's funny because there used to be skits on Saturday Night Live about hijackings. It used to be funny. Then 9/11 happened and suddenly it wasn't anymore. But hijackings used to happen all the dang time on airliners, and now they don't as much. To put it that way. Plus, hijacking an airliner is kind of, really risky because you have the air marshal who can just shoot you. You have passengers who are very paranoid. If you pull out a gun in an airplane, you probably get jumped by like 4 people if they're, light enough to do that. But really, hijacking a plane is not economical anymore. Travel's so cheap, you may as well just fly to wherever you want to go. Nowhere's really off limits anymore. You can fly to Lebanon if you want to. You can fly to Cuba now if you want to. It's not hard to go anywhere these days. So, especially if you're in the U.S., actually Canada's probably the closest and best country to fly to anywhere, because Canada will fly you to Cuba. Can't do that in the States so much, except on a private plane. But the future of travel is what I'm trying to get at. Technologically speaking, our base method of travel has really not changed that much. Like, not really a whole lot has changed in terms of how fast we go and all these different things. Well, that could soon not be true anymore, actually, because a billionaire's supersonic jet project is lifting off, you might say. Aerion, the supersonic jet maker backed by Texas billionaire Robert Bass, is planning to choose a manufacturing site during the first half of the next year, as it's targeting delivering the first faster-than-sound business aircraft in 2023. Now, that's a bit of a ways away. That's almost 10 years away now. 2023 is pretty far in the future, I will admit. But it's not as far as we might think, because it's only like 7 years away. So 2023, well, it sounds like that's a really long ways away. It actually isn't that much. But the timeline unveiled on Monday is fleshing out how Aerion and partner Airbus Group SE intended to build a civilian plane capable of transonic travel, a niche left vacant since the retirement of the Concorde in 2003. The team has made preliminary designs for a carbon fiber wing structure, fuselage, landing gear, and fuel system, along with other components as well. We see the clear and achievable technical solutions to the design of a supersonic jet and a realistic roadmap for helping Aerion proceed towards construction and flight, said Airbus Senior Vice President Ken McKenzie in a statement. This is coming from Bloomberg Business, by the way. Airbus will provide major components and Aerion will do the final assembly. And the company said that in a statement released at the National Business Aviation Association in Las Vegas. So for the production site, Aerion is needing a 100-acre area near a U.S. airport with a runway at least 9,000 feet long. The plan is to break ground on the factory by the year 2018 and then pump out the jets by 2023. So not bad, actually. That's a pretty good time frame. Now, we all know what happens to plans. Battle plans never survive the first shot. That's just always how it is. And that tends to happen with business plans, too, where business plans, time frames hardly ever survive the first groundbreaking. So we'll see how this one plays out. Maybe we actually will be flying in supersonic jets by 2023, but maybe not as well. I'm really excited about the idea of supersonic jets, too, because I'm tired of the whole idea of flying so slow as we do. Like, I know 747s fly really dang fast, but that's not fast enough for me, because we are very impatient now as a society. We are very impatient. Think about this. We are a society of not wanting to wait for anything. That's why everything is speeding up. Our computers are getting faster. Our internet connections are light speed almost. Everything is now faster. Society, the way we order food, we're not the slow society anymore. And we're probably never going to get back to that slow society either. Our music is even faster sometimes. We don't want a slow society. We want to move quickly. Especially us young people. We're tired of the whole, ooh, got to wait for this and that. No, we want to move quickly. We are a fast-moving society now. No more waiting. None of that. We want to get things done. And so really the whole idea of travel is almost outdated even for that society too. Our travel needs to be getting faster and faster. If travel were progressing the same speed as computing did back in the 90s, then, or from the 70s to now, we'd be teleporting by now if travel had traveled as fast as computing has. So it's really frustrating to think that we are still using the same travel methods that have been around since the 80s. That just drives me nuts, really. I know how advanced and complicated and complex the whole system is, but still, I wish it could be faster. And supersonic jets might be the way to fix that problem of speed. So a supersonic jet, which you can fly in and you can be a passenger in, is really kind of an amazing thing. Thinking about going faster than the speed of sound, which not many people have done, actually. I mean, how many of us have gone faster than the speed of sound? Really, the only way to do that is to fly in the military. That's kind of the only way to go faster than the speed of sound. And so the opportunity for basically anyone to do that is pretty amazing, actually. And eventually everyone will have gone faster than the speed of sound. And that's also pretty amazing. It's funny, too, because there used to be scientists who thought that the body could not handle speeds faster than 60 miles per hour. And now we're learning about G-forces and acceleration, all sorts of things. And we realize that we can actually survive really, really fast speeds. The International Space Station is traveling really, really fast. And those guys are kind of okay. Space launches make you go really, really fast with lots of G-forces. And yet, those guys are fine. They get flattened kind of, but they're fine. So we can handle a lot more than we think. Human bodies are pretty tough, actually. Not in the grand scheme of things, but on a human level, we're actually pretty dang tough. We can handle a lot, and we can recover from a lot, too. Like, I got beaten up pretty badly yesterday, but today I'm fine because I'm young and spry. So supersonic jets are going to be coming hopefully soon, and I'm waiting for that day to come. Hey, Metro PCS customers are apparently going to be getting some cool free stuff, according to The Verge. Now, we don't really have a whole lot of Metro PCS around here. I know it's pretty big in Atlanta, but T-Mobile is now passing down some of its perks to Metro PCS, and the first of which is Music Unlimited, which is a rebranded version of T-Mobile's Music Freedom. That's going to be starting on November the 19th, which is 2 days from now, where Metro PCS customers who chose one of the company's new $40, $50, or $60 plans will be able to stream popular music services without it counting against their data usage. So it's pretty straightforward stuff. Then there's Data Maximizer, which promises to let Metro PCS users stream up to 3 times as much video than they previously could. Every video that users watch will be downgraded to 480p, which consumes less data at the cost of quality, and which is basically the same as T-Mobile's binge on feature, by the way. Metro PCS is revamping its plans with the new changes by bumping up included data. $30 now gets you unlimited talk, text, and 1 gig of data. $40 gets you 3 gigabytes of 50 and what was I saying? Oh, 60 gets you 8 gigabytes of LTE, so that's pretty cool. For each of those, family plans costs $5 less as well. So Metro PCS is sort of a subcontractor. It's a subcarrier, I guess. So Metro PCS is getting some pretty cool stuff. I'm really excited about the different changes that are happening to the cell market. Not as fast as I would like. I use Ultra Mobile, which is a subcontractor of T-Mobile. I like it a lot. I don't get a whole lot of data because I don't really have cause to use a whole lot of data because I'm never out anywhere. The only problem I have really with it, though, is the whole problem with, like, I can't go out in rural areas and talk on the phone because I don't get great cell coverage out in rural areas. As an example, I was out in Fall Creek Falls with my T-Mobile phone, and I got the worst coverage. I didn't get any signal at all, but I knew other people who had AT&T phones, and for some reason they were talking just fine. So, oh well. Of course, they were texting because nobody talks anymore. Who does that? The phone? Who makes phone calls anymore? That's just so lame. Everybody texts these days. Really, it's funny too. Talking about society and culture, we're seeing that sort of as a trend too. Is people don't really want to talk as much. People don't really want to talk as much because we're noticing too that people want to communicate over text because it's so much easier to communicate over text as opposed to talking. Like I'm a good communicator, I like to think. I think I'm decently good at communicating to different people. But when it comes to texting, I just find that that's a lot easier. Maybe we're raising a generation of, or I'm not raising anybody. You're raising a generation of antisocial maniacs, maybe. Or maybe not. Maybe we're just regular people like other regular people. I saw a really funny comic the other day that was, I guess is a political cartoon. I don't know. It was funny. But it was people basically, in fact, maybe Keon shared it with me. I don't remember, but it was people whining about things. And it started out like in the 1800s, this magazine. Why you got your nose in that magazine? You trying to isolate yourself from the rest of the world. And in the 30s, it was a newspaper. Why are you hiding yourself in that newspaper? Trying to isolate yourself from the rest of the world. Then watching TV. Why are you isolating yourself with that TV? You're trying to hide yourself from the rest of the world. And there's kids on smartphones. Why are you hiding yourself behind these smartphones? You're trying to isolate yourself from the rest of the world. Never go out and do anything. It's the same gripe for 100 years. And for some reason, we just don't recognize that. Like, people don't change. Technology changes all around us, but we don't really change at all. Something that has annoyed me, though, is one I guess, counter effect of the texting culture, which we have today. I don't even know if you could call it texting culture. Just the fact that we text a lot has changed how we communicate in general, too. Sentences tend to be shorter. We tend to be less eloquent. I don't see that as a bad thing. It's more short and to the point, very Twitter, 120 characters or less. I like that because I don't like people who, I don't like them, not that I don't like them as people, but I don't like sentences which just ramble on and don't get to the point. Like, just tell me what you're trying to say. Are you trying to say something? Then please just say it. Because it's funny, because I talk to older people, and I'm not dissing older people, but I know I talk about them a lot, but I'm not dissing older people. I'm just sort of noticing that difference in generation where they talk slowly, and that's not bad. They talk slowly, and it takes them a while to get to the point they're trying to make. And as a younger person, that just drives me nuts because I want you to just get to the point. What are you trying to say? And it seems like every sentence turns into this meandering story. And I'm like, just tell me what you're trying to say. Now, I don't have that problem with anybody I work with because we're all news people. And so we try to shorten every sentence we possibly can to be as efficient as possible. We're very efficient in how we talk. So I don't have that problem here. But even talking to my parents sometimes, it's just like, man, just say what you're trying to say. You're plodding along, telling a story where you don't need to. And it's just like, what are you trying to say? What do you want to tell me? Just say it. It drives me nuts. And I wonder if eventually in the future, we'll just be down to communicating with pictographs. Maybe that's why the Egyptians communicate with pictographs. They'd already been through the whole cycle of written language, and they just got bored with it and decided to go with pictographs instead because it was faster and easier to communicate what you were trying to say. Maybe that's why the Egyptians were so advanced. Well, we have our own form of hieroglyphics, of pictograms. We have emojis, and I really hate emojis. I really do. I hate them so much. There's something about them. Now, I don't hate like the usage of them. It's just some of them drive me nuts. Like the crying laughing face, which happens to be, by the way, the Oxford English Dictionary's word of the year, which is not a word. It's an emoji. Oh, according to The Verge, language is a wonderful, masterfully evolving beast, and we're all just puppets bending to its many whims. Dictionaries aren't safe from the power of a linguistic whim either, and so maybe that's why Oxford Dictionaries has chosen an emoji as its 2015 word of the year. It's the crying from laughter / crying from happiness emoji, officially known as the face with tears of joy emoji. I just call it the crying laughing face because that's what I call it. Dictionaries have been choosing annual words of the year for kind of years, but this year the Oxford University Press partnered with SwiftKey, actually the keyboard I use on my Android phone, to determine the most popular emoji from around the world. And you can understand, actually, because emojis are kind of universal. The crying laughing face is something that is universal. Everyone recognizes it. Basically, everyone gets that, oh, that's the crying laughing face, and everyone sort of understands what it means. It's crying from laughter. It makes sense. I mean, it makes sense. I just don't like it. So this year they chose the emoji. It's also possible this whole word of the year thing is just a long con so that Oxford Dictionaries can have a conversation with itself. Last year's word of the year was vape. And this year the Oxford University Press is having a laugh about it. Vape. Yes, remember vape? Well, actually, we still do it. Vaping, you know, the whole vaporizer pens and all that. I mean, I get vaping, and I've done vaping, and it's not bad, I guess. I'm not advertising for it or anything, but, I mean, it's funny how we make a big deal out of stuff that's not worth making a big deal about, like vaping. Like, it's not a big deal. It's like, God, it's freaking vaping. Who cares? And, like, emojis. We make such a huge deal about just little petty things, and it's like, who cares, man? There's so many different, more important things going on that don't really matter. But, I mean, I understand, too, because I totally do that. Like the Google logo. When the Google logo changed to its awful, stupid, simplistic Google logo, I got legitimately mad. I got upset. And when Twitter changed it from the favorite to the like, I got mad. I got upset. I was like, why would you do that? Because that's half of your identity right there that differentiates you from, you know, Facebook, your rival there. Let's change it to like instead to completely unify all user interfaces and just make sure that there's no disparity between any of them. Ugh, I hate it. I hate it so much. And I can't really tell you why exactly. it takes all the individuality, I guess, out of Twitter. Like it just makes Twitter basically Facebook but shorter, and I hate that. And I really hope that Twitter doesn't change the 140 characters or less thing, because honestly, 140 characters leads to better discussions than paragraphs upon paragraphs. Again, Twitter is one of those things that's sort of changing our culture in a lot of different ways. It's sort of an exemplification of how different we are today, where we're totally fine with communicating in 120 characters or less. And I can't imagine in Victorian days them doing that. And that's why it's really hard for me to read Victorian fiction, by the way, or nonfiction. It's actually really hard for me to read that stuff because it's so meandering and slow. It's weird. Like, I cannot read Sense and Sensibility. I can't read that book, or Jane Eyre. It's so slow and so plodding to me that I just can't read it. It's like, get to the freaking point. Just say what you're trying to say. I can't read that. Like, I know it's high literature and everyone thinks it's the best stuff ever, but I really can't do it. Like Shakespeare, I can't do that, man. It's too dang slow. I'm not even like ADD. I'm not. It's just for some reason that just drives me nuts how meandering it is. I just want people to get to the point, and they don't. It's weird, too, because I can read a lot of other books from that era. Like, I've read The Law like a million times, and I've read A Social Contract by a zillion times, but for some reason, I can't read other stuff. It's weird. I don't know. There's something about that wording that just does not mesh with me. And it makes me wonder if the way we're communicating, how it's changing so much is going to change the literature that we care about. Because the classics, we all talk about the classics like they're the best thing ever. And it does kind of make me wonder if those are sort of going to go by the wayside, because we do have another 200 something years now of different books that we could read that might be considered classics. So it does make me wonder if those are eventually going to sort of fade away and be replaced by something else. But then maybe the classics are classics for a reason. Like, people still read Beowulf. It's basically required reading in like every school ever. So everyone's read Beowulf most likely, and people will probably still be forced to read Shakespeare, even though I don't really like it that much, to be quite honest with you. People go on about how great Shakespeare is. I can't get it. I don't get into it. I don't think that it's that great, but maybe I'm just illiterate. Maybe that's it. Maybe I'm just illiterate. Or maybe I like more exciting fiction, because I really like Contractor Combatants. I thought it was a really good book. And I liked the Dragon Tattoo books. Those were really good too. I liked, actually, come to think of it, I don't read a whole lot. Oh, well. Well, this is Digital Drive here on Hot News Talk Radio. And you can be sure that we are brought to you by Rick Davis Gold and Diamonds. They have a total store sale going on right now. You need to get it before Christmas. You can get some great gifts. It's 40, 60, and 70% off on jewelry and gifts, designer jewelry and gifts even. Also, you can get cash when you sell gold, silver, bracelets, rings, diamonds, and jewelry. Rick Davis is going to pay you cash personally. That's cash, cash, cash. You get some today over at Rick Davis Gold and Diamonds. And coming up after me, by the way, is probably someone who's read a lot more books than I have, is Keon Rose, and his show is Clutch with Keon Rose. He does our resident sports show here at Hot News Talk Radio, because he's the only one who actually knows anything about sports other than Mr. Judd. I'm also the worst when it comes to sports. I, for some reason, don't really know anything about sports. I think baseball has innings, and I think football has touchdowns, and I don't know what happens in curling, but I do know that it's fun to watch. And usually Slavic arm wrestling is really fun to watch too. But like, I'm terrible at sports. I should be better at it. I just know that I like the Bulldogs and I don't like the Vols. And for some reason, saying that is like a death sentence in Tennessee. So I guess I shouldn't have said that. Maybe people stop listening because I said I don't like the Vols. I don't know. Clutch of Keon Rose is coming up next.
This is a mob mode. This is the mob mode.